July 27th, 1898. Marching bands lead thousands of people to the highest point in downtown St. Paul, Minnesota. Columns of veterans, stone cutters, and other workers march to the ribbon-draped speakers stand. Here, the new Capitol is rising from the ground. Onlookers lean over the partially finished first-floor walls. Among the throng of dignitaries is Minnesota's first territorial governor, Alexander Ramsey, to officially lay the cornerstone for the People's House, the grandest building in the state and one of the finest Capitol buildings in the country. The cornerstone is 5 feet long with a hollow core to hold a copper box. Into the box are placed more than 45 books, newspapers, photos, and documents, including histories of legislators and soldiers since the founding of the state. The names of the Capitol commissioners and architect Cass Gilbert, as well as his associates, are etched on a bronze plate. But the box contains not a single name of a worker or contractor who erected this structure. Since construction began in 1896, hundreds of workers have already been drawn to this spot. They dug and laid the foundation and built the lower walls. Hundreds more will come to work here through the building's completion in 1907. For some, it is the spark for long, successful careers and the beginning of generations in Minnesota. For others, it's one stop of many in a wandering artisan's life. For others, it will mark the end of their lives. These people all came together to create this Minnesota icon, but they have remained nameless until now. This is their story. Workers left their own time capsules to mark their work on the Capitol. At the base of the gold leaf finial and ball atop the dome, 223 feet from the ground, 3 people gathered exactly 110 years after the day that a mysterious and tantalizing message was left there.
I was involved in the restoration of the state capitol's finial and copper roof. And during the selective demolition of the original copper roof, we were fortunate enough that the sheet metal workers that we were working with took it upon themselves to save this small cleat that supports one of the original copper shingles that was up on the roof.
O.C. Mankey, August 10th, 1902. The etch clue sent historian Dave Reilly on a search through city directories, payroll accounts, death certificates, and cemetery records to discover that O.C. was Otto Mankey.
I looked for a death record on him, and he lived a long time, into the 40s. And from there, went to the newspapers and finally get to an obituary where some living people are listed as survivors, including Michelle. So this is your grandfather's signature. He sent a message to you.
Having my great-grandfather, be so involved in this project. It's very emotional. Actually seeing the handwriting, because it was something I would have never have seen before, and just to put myself in that same position, standing here, I'm sure that he would have never guessed 110 years later that I'd be standing here. Maybe it was a call for us to know the history of this building, both the past and its current, and what the future can mean for this building. What I've pieced together, he was about 34 years old when he was up here, and then of course a couple of years, maybe 10 years older when he actually worked on the cathedral. So I can't imagine.
The vast majority of those who worked on the new Capitol came from outside the state. And like Otto, most of them were immigrants or children of immigrants.
He was born here in St. Paul. His father came over here. My great-great-grandmother She talks about the 4-week journey across the Atlantic.
The Mankeys fled their homeland of Pomerania, part of Prussia, that suffered frequent wars between Germany and Poland. The Rockhots family also left conflict in their country, Bohemia, now the Czech Republic.
When you consider how bad things must have been for them to haul up stakes and everything they owned and come to a completely foreign country in 1863, it must have been pretty terrible. He was 14 years old, and he came with his parents from a very small village in Bohemia. He was a really fine finishing carpenter. We knew that. We knew that he did all the fine finishing work in the James J. Hill mansion here in St. Paul. That was my mother's understanding. She always told us that he was the head carpenter at the State Capitol building during its construction and afterwards as well.
Fleeing the wars on one continent, the Rockhots family encountered the American Civil War on another.
They entered in Philadelphia on a train. They sat in the Philadelphia station for 3 or 4 days in the first week of July in 1863. Their travels to this area were delayed because of the Battle of Gettysburg. And there we are in the governor's suite looking at these panels. We know he worked on some of the finishing work in that governor's suite, and all over it is these massive paintings of the Battle of Gettysburg. And it's the full circle sort of experience here is almost beyond comprehension. I wonder if, if he ever knew that there were going to be paintings up there of the Battle of Gettysburg.
While many tradespeople had already come to St. Paul when work began on the Capitol, others were recruited to work on the construction.
The general contractor had been in the South and had observed the work that black artisans were able to do. And so he contacted Cassaville Bullard, who was a mason extraordinaire, and he made him a general foreman.
My grandfather, Cassaville Bullard, was a brick mason as well as a stone cutter, as well as a carpenter, which was kind of rare. He had 10 children in Tennessee, Memphis, Tennessee, and because of that skill and because of housing discrimination at that time, segregation, racism, and really couldn't find opportunities to work, or if he did find work, it was more in the poorer neighborhoods and maybe not the best opportunity to feed his large family. So through some different connections, people heard of his skill and they were asked him to come here. And so he came here in 1898 and started working on the Capitol.
The general contractor sent Cassaville out to find African American or black masons, and around 20 of them came up here, including my grandfather. And Cassaville Bullard said, whoever I bring on this job has to perform at a certain level. His house is still standing. That's the kind of quality that he demanded of the people who worked for him. And I believe my grandfather had that quality, and they formed a friendship that, as far as I know, lasted throughout both of their lives.
Hoist operator Zebulon Olsen was one of many Swedes who left poverty at home in a great wave of migration to American cities.
Our grandmother was a historian, and this is one of her notes, and it says that we have a marble egg made by Grandpa Zebulon Olsen when he set all the stones in building the Minnesota State Capitol building. It's the same marble as in the structure.
This is the egg, and Grandma Olsen had this on the buffet. He took a chip from the construction process and put it in his pocket and made the egg later.
The egg is the thing that, when you have a memento or
this
something.
Is the connection.
That has a story that goes with it, and someone keeps telling the story generation after generation, then.
This is shared history. There is a connection to the state capitol, and it is strong, and it keeps us here.
Yeah, the roots go deep.
As an architect supervising the restoration of the Capitol Dome, Ginny Lakovic has had a chance to study the construction history, read the original building plans, and closely examine the craftsmanship that State House trades workers brought to the structure.
Drawing sets at that point had maybe 100 sheets, maybe not even that many for this building. Compared to what we would issue now to build a building like this would be a 4-volume set of 100 sheets each. So, I mean, the buildings at this time, I mean, you relied a lot on the craftsmen, on their knowledge and their sensibilities. I mean, there are often comments that say you'll do it this way and then, it'll take you up to a certain point and then it's, using typical methods. And what are those? They didn't describe them at that point. They just relied on craftsmen and the trades to actually carry that forward.
The building was essentially built by hand. Men and horses provided the power necessary to dig, move, and lift materials. Every inch of the surface was crafted by skilled artisans.
The tooling of it and the craftsmanship that went into it is really why the building has held up as well as it has. The detailing is amazing. Every piece sheds water, and some very subtly, but still, every single inch of the building was designed with intent. And at the scale of the materials, it's amazing.
Craft workers arrived in St. Paul with this level of skill through rigorous formal and informal apprenticeships in Europe or through American training based on these models. In trades like stone cutting, these traditions still survive in Europe, giving a glimpse into the preparation that builders applied to the construction of the Capitol.
My training in Italy was mostly being with my father and uncle, two tradesmen. I believe that is the best training you can get, having hands-on, so that you learn doing things. And that's how I literally learned how to do everything. That was part of stone and masonry. When I came here, it was already more than 12 years that I used to work, so I started very young.
Stefano worked as a foreman, restoring the steps on the west side of the Capitol in 2012.
Those steps have been there for 100 years, and the workmanship at that time was amazing. They really were proud of what they were doing. And you see those people in the picture that I saw, with the hat. And that remember me, those people I used to work in Italy, They were always well-dressed, well-respected workers. Being an immigrant myself, I just, sometimes I think, so this stone was set 100 years ago by a French, by a German, somebody that came to do this job. And sometimes you just think that the history repeats himself.
At age 14, Jan Rockhatz already had 2 years of Old World apprenticeship when he arrived in Belle Plaine, Minnesota. He honed his skills building homes in the growing community. The prospect of regular work and more time to spend with his family and fellow Bohemians led him to St. Paul, where he built his own house in the Czech neighborhood off West 7th Street.
He did this fine finishing work. I think that's utterly true because I have beautiful pieces of furniture that he made.
This is the trunk from my great-great-grandfather. It's what he used on the job site at the Capitol. They made their own planes, they sharpened them. That's his original, it's got his marks on it.
Artisans commonly made their own tools as part of their trade, like David McAllister's great-grandfather, Eric Isaacson, and his great-uncle, Nils Nelson, Swedish-born stonemasons who served as foreman of the Capitol.
I took this box out of the garage. It had been attributed to one of my ancestors. It was Eric's or it was Nels. A lot of times they would make tools on site from bar steel, and a lot of these look to be that type of thing. Somebody put some energy into that a few times.
Nils Nelson could use these tools to cut a stone building block to size or to carve detailed sculptures.
The marble sculpture, it's probably 24 to 30 inches wide.
It's a big clipper ship. Uncle Nels made it.
Artisans like Nils, who had been a Swedish sailor, were so confident in their skills, they could even stand up to architect Cass Gilbert.
The foreman of the crew that was setting the stone was having to haul the stone up by rope, and they got stopped by Cass Gilbert and criticized for doing something that, the person, Nils Nilsson, said, well, we don't respond to you. And so the thing was taken to be adjudicated, I guess, by one of the Butler brothers, and Cass Gilbert reasoned that he was the captain of the ship, and so you should take orders from him. And Nilsson said that I know the protocol. The captain never gives orders to the men. He gives the orders to the bosun, and the bosun tells the men. And so he said, told Mr. Gilbert that I'm the bosun and Mr. Butler is the captain, and you're nothing.
And general contractor William Butler decided to keep Nils on the job. Patrick Butler's name was handed down from his great-grandfather, who left famine-stricken Ireland in 1852 with a civil engineering degree from Trinity College in Dublin. The determined immigrant tried his hand at many jobs. As a young man, he was a farmhand in the East and ran a bar in Galena, Illinois, with his wife Mary Ann, where they often served drinks to Ulysses S. Grant. Patrick was a teacher, contractor, and farmer near Northfield, Minnesota. One by one, Patrick's sons left the farm for greater opportunities in growing St. Paul. The older brothers, Walter and William, became bricklayers and charter members of Union Local No. 1. They struck out on their own and recruited their brothers, John, Cooley, and Emmett, to undertake subcontracting brickwork. They soon became contractors for entire jobs, and partnering with Mike Ryan, built Old Main at Macalester College. Winning the bids for general contractor to build the main structure in the dome of the Capitol was the greatest challenge the new Butler Ryan Company and successor Butler Brothers Company had ever faced. It would test every skill and resource they had. George Grant Company won the bid for the first phase of the new Capitol construction, excavating and laying the foundation. Basement work was subcontracted to the Lauer Brothers and the Universal Construction Company. This base was constructed of limestone from a quarry near Winona. Like the workers, the materials for the state capitol came from all over Minnesota, the nation, and the world, but not without controversy. Deciding on the source of the stone for the rest of the Capitol building sparked anger. Architect Cass Gilbert, inspired by the architecture in Europe and impressed by the Chicago World's Fair of 1893, wanted the luminous white of marble and favored stone from Georgia. Minnesota businesses and labor in general argued that the State House should be built entirely with Minnesota materials to boost jobs and the economy of the state. The wounds of the Civil War were still in living memory, and sourcing the stone from a southern state rankled many. The final compromise called for Minnesota granite to be used for the basement and steps of the structure, and marble to cover the upper portions of the building. The marble was brought from the Amicalola Quarry, leased and operated by the Butler Ryan Company in Pickens County, Georgia. Most of the granite came from the Baxter Quarry in St. Joseph Township, just west of St. Cloud. Columns inside the rotunda were shaped and finished by a huge lathe run by the Rockville Granite Company from granite quarried locally, as well as from Ortonville in western Minnesota. A reddish-colored band of quartzite circling the third-story level of the rotunda came from an area also near the South Dakota border. Sandstone, cut from pits in what is now Banning State Park, supported the base of the Capitol Dome. kilns in Chaska, Minnesota supplied more than 2 million buff-colored bricks for the walls. Most of the walls inside the Capitol were faced with warm-toned dolomitic limestone, quarried in Kasota by the Babcock & Wilcox Company. In the Capitol's interior, stone from Minnesota was augmented by more than 20 other varieties that originated from all over the world, including France, Greece, Italy, and Northern Africa. While the type of stone varied from quarry to quarry, the labor to free it from the earth was much like the work in the marble pits of Pickens County, Georgia.
If you started with a company, you pretty much started at the bottom, and unless you was the boss's son or something like that, you know. And they actually had something they termed as the mud gang, and basically their job consisted of the hammer and wedges, lifting or breaking the stone. And so I guess that was probably a pretty dirty job. They were working down in the bottom in the mud all the time.
And marble weighs 170 pounds a cubic foot, so it's pretty heavy. But back then, you lifted one if you were told to, and you know, and I'm sure that there were a lot of sore backs at night in the marble industry. but the men became real adept at what they did. They were real craftsmen.
They had to sling them sledgehammer, you know, and them boys get to singing, we'd all hit it. You hit them, every one of them at the same time.
While manual strength and skill dominated quarry work, new machinery was revolutionizing the productivity of the industry at the close of the 19th century.
To pull out a block, you have to drill holes along the grid, all along the grid, and there are two bits working at the same time. And in the old days, they used steam to drive these bits, the drills.
Then to cut the rock, we had channeling machines. You sit up here and they had a piece of railroad track. And these things had two heads on them, they had 5 drills like this. One of them turned one way and the other way, and they sat up here all day long, you know, like that. You know, boom, 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 all day long. And back then, if it got a bit cloudy or whatnot, it'd be so dusty in the hole you couldn't see down in there. You'd have to wait till the dust settled.
In the summertime, it gets over 100 degrees down there because of all the reflection on the stone.
In most of the quarries, they had ladder roads. The ladders were actually constructed of wood. And I think some of our quarries are 180 feet deep.
We went in over morning, and we had a break where most of us stayed in the hole at break, and then we'd come out at dinner and get 30 minutes, and then go back. Even the older fellas, they done that, you know.
They got old fast. People who worked in the industry got old fast, but they supported the family.
The people that ran the saws and the wagons lived in the area. A number of them used to be slaves. The carving of the stone, the artisanship of the stone was, they had to import cutters from Vermont, from France, from Italy, Belgium, all over the world actually. And I believe some of them actually ended up in Minnesota at St. Paul's to help finish off the state capitol there.
Most of the quarry companies were started by entrepreneurs who had worked in stone pits or cut stone themselves. Scotch immigrant stonecutter Henry Alexander founded Rockville Granite, which became Cold Spring Granite Company west of St. Cloud. Albert Steinbauer and the Bizance family developed quarries near Winona. The Vetter family took over the limestone quarry business started by Joseph Babcock shortly after he helped found the town of Kasota.
My father's main goal in life was to start a stone business with his sons when they grew up. My grandfather, Bernard, had worked in stone in Germany, before he immigrated in the 1880s, settled at Kasota, and he started a monument shop there. The old B&W management saw that he had some good talent and hired him, and he eventually was in charge of the production for the company that furnished the stone for the Capitol. My father, Paul, worked for the Babcock Company in Kasota. He first started working in the quarry, where he and his horse were hired to run a derrick hoist in the quarry. And then he worked into various jobs until he was in charge of production for the Babcock Company. Back in the 30s, during the Depression, he bought the original quarry land where our plant is located now. At age 65 in 1954, took his life savings and bought used stone equipment. And the family basically worked for a couple years setting up this machinery, building a building. So we operated pretty much on a shoestring, kind of learned to walk before we learned to run. It's like there's stone dust in the blood.
The railroads and the men who built and ran them made it possible to construct massive stone buildings that rose across America in the late 19th and early 20th centuries.
With the development of the railroads and the development of spur tracks, smaller tracks, it opened up these quarries to easy transportation of these 75-ton blocks of marble.
The rail line came adjacent to the pits, and in most cases, I'm sure they were able to extract the marble with the derrick and place it directly onto the rail line.
While the Minnesota Capitol was to feature flags and artwork honoring the state's Union soldiers who fought to end slavery, the main railroad lines that carried marble for the State House were built by convict labor, overwhelmingly African Americans. The prisoners worked under slave-like conditions because of minor, even fabricated offenses, like loitering or speaking too loudly. The state and local governments even rented out these prisoners to do hard labor for private companies, like the Marietta and North Georgia Railroad, which built the line between the marble quarries and Atlanta on the way to St. Paul. At the turn of the century, steam could power engines that pulled or lifted massive loads on tracks or from stationary hoists. But hauling all the tons of stone from the train depot through downtown St. Paul and uphill 90 vertical feet to the Capitol construction site still relied on horse-drawn wagons, guided by teamsters like John Gary. John championed fellow workers' rights, founding Teamsters Local 120 in Minnesota. He rose to vice president of the International Union. Once the stone arrived at the Capitol site, the workers and contractors had to figure out how to get it cut to size, finished, and moved to where it belonged in the massive building. The Butlers were early adopters of the latest innovations, like steam-powered hoists mounted on rails above the structure that could move back and forth wherever they were needed. The son of Capitol carpenter Jan Rachatz, John Rachatz Jr., designed other innovative features at the Capitol.
My great-uncle John is sort of the star of the family because of his association with Cass Gilbert. Cass Gilbert basically hired him right out of high school and sent him to the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. And he was in Paris studying there, and I have seen letters in which Cass Gilbert directed him to please pay special attention to all the classical architecture, the building facades. There's one letter in which he sort of admonishes him to to try as much as possible to not have too much fun, but to actually, study. And so he was in Paris from 1900 to 1902, at which point Cass Gilbert called him back to St. Paul because he said he needed him. And it was at that point, I think, that Uncle John sort of unofficially became a real primary assistant to Cass Gilbert, because I do know that he was an assistant architect for the State Capitol building.
Likely inspired by French architecture, John created the design for the cantilevered staircase in the northeast corner of the Minnesota Capitol building, at the time a unique feature in America. As part of the deal to use Georgia marble, the stone was to be finished on site. A shed was built on the northwest corner of the grounds to house the steam-powered cutting and polishing equipment. Here, too, stone cutters used recently introduced pneumatic chisels to sculpt the statues that would adorn the State House. William Butler invented a lathe to cut flutes in the massive marble columns, saving countless hours of labor. The huge equipment had to be anchored to the concrete floor with iron rods. The continuous din from the stone finishing machinery could be heard many blocks away. The noise followed the workers at the end of their shifts as they walked or boarded streetcars to go home. Many immigrant workers headed for neighborhoods where people from their homelands had settled together.
European immigrants settled in communities and, in a sense, gravitated to the place where they could speak their language, share their culture.
A German enclave was closest to downtown along West 7th Street, with another community north of University in what is now Frogtown. More established immigrants helped out newcomers, reinforcing the ethnic character of the neighborhoods.
Otto and his wife quite often would rent that home out to other family members or other people who were just coming here, and stay with them until they got on their feet and then found jobs and found housing for themselves.
Germans represented the largest ethnic group in Minnesota. Their influence was reflected in the Capitol basement Rathskeller. Modeled on drinking rooms in Germany's town halls, it featured mottos stenciled in German across the ceiling.
Ein frischer Trank, der Arbeit Dank. Denk, wenn dir warm ist, an den arm ist. Ein super Gast ist niemals Last.
Other immigrant groups occupied distinct St. Paul districts, like the Bohemian neighborhood around West 7th Street. Here, carpenter Jan Rachatz made his home and helped build the Czech and Slovak Protection Society, the CSPS Hall.
He and his wife, this was a central part of their social and cultural life, and it was for my grandfather as well. Whenever my mother and I came to Minnesota, we would always drive by this building. And she would say, there's the Bohemian Club. That's where your great-grandfather and your grandfather went all the time for various things and functions. Clearly, this was very important to them in maintaining their ties to their culture.
And this would be the place where they could speak their language, where their children were actually taught their language. And so we have every year a Czech play or Slovak play produced in the hall. When they would have their parties or festivals, the children would end up sleeping on the chairs while the parents danced and had their good times.
For the Catholic Bohemians, St. Stanislaus Church was the hub of community activities, just as churches were for other immigrant groups.
Their churches, of course, were central to their development and to their socializing, to their cultural preservation.
After working long hours and relative isolation during the week, many African American workers came together at churches on Sundays for services and socializing. The church was the focus of community activities for Ernest Jones's wife, Cora Lee, their children, and the next 2 generations.
My grandmother was an active member of St. James AME Church, African Methodist Episcopal Church. My grandmother was on the usher board. She was She was there every Sunday. I think until maybe she was about maybe 99. That was a loving church. We'd have May Day, and we'd run around the pole with the crepe paper and stuff.
Unions also brought members and their families together.
My mother remembers that every Sunday, all of the Masons would go out for a picnic during the summertime, and they would play and they would have great fun and they would cook food.
But workers needed unions for more than socializing. Members banded together to deal with severe economic disparities and the harsh, sometimes dangerous and violent conditions of turn-of-the-century workplaces.
There's a story of the tradition of having to be a better man than the person you fired, so you were supposed to knock somebody down before you could fire them. And there was a shovel runner that came across one of the Butler brothers, and so I don't know which one it was, whether it was Emmett or not, went to fire the shovel runner and went up to knock him down before he fired him, and got knocked down instead. So he tried again and got knocked down instead. So the shovel runner never got fired because he couldn't be knocked down.
Most of the women who contributed to the construction and furnishing of the Capitol worked at a distance from the building. In the Butler Ryan office, Catherine Butler, no relation, worked as a stenographer. A New York company that manufactured furniture for the State House was co-owned by a woman. The elegant downtown department store, Schooneman's, supplied Capitol draperies. Some sewed on location by seamstresses. Several of the women who did work on the State House construction site, like laborers Anna Young, Josie Sharon, and Mary Walker, lived at the House of the Good Shepherd, a Catholic home for impoverished women and girls. The residents supported the home with a commercial laundry. The State House construction site could be a rough place and a dangerous one. 6 workers died in the course of building the state capitol. The first worker to lose his life was Felix Arthur, who came north with the marble ship from Georgia. On May 4th, 1898, Felix was working on a stone polishing machine when he got caught in the flywheel. He died in the hospital early the next morning. Felix was only 25 years old. His body was returned to Nelson, Georgia, where his parents were so distraught they left the area and moved to Texas. John Biersack, 36-year-old son of Bavarian immigrants to Wisconsin, died in October 1898, a few days after he fell from a derrick. These accidents stirred up controversy in the newspapers about safety conditions at the Capitol site, and even garnered the public concern of the Labor Commissioner and State Attorney. Yet 4 more men fell to their deaths in the following 5 years, not to mention non-fatal injuries. The state could inspect sites and request accident reports, but had no authority to enforce safety rules or fine employers.
I think the level of safety when this building was built was based on everybody's sense of their own judgment and their own sense of safety, what they were comfortable with. You know, there was no OSHA. There were, you know, again, your safety was your own responsibility, and if you made a mistake, you paid dearly for it.
The last fatal accident happened in 1903, when 18-year-old John Corrigan fell 32 feet near the Senate chamber. The young man, just a week or 2 on the job, was pushing a heavily loaded wheelbarrow across 3 narrow planks when it tipped over, and he fell with it. The outrage over young Corrigan's death may have had an effect. He was the last worker to die building the Capitol.
There were no hard hats, any kind of protection for the head. You know, the scaffolding was built on site, and everything was cobbled together using whatever was available. I mean, that the handrails and the guardrails that are now part of all of these projects are there for a reason. I think every safety implement you see as you look across the roofs and at the scaffolding is because of some unfortunate accident in the past. And there are organizations that monitor that.
None of the workers who were killed in Capitol construction accidents had children. Their names were not collected in any one place, and they were never publicly acknowledged. Not until Workers' Memorial Day ceremonies on the Capitol grounds in 2011 and 2012 finally recognized the sacrifice these tradesmen made.
Today, we are here to recognize also 5 individuals that lost their life building the People's House over 100 years ago.
There was little financial or legal responsibility on the part of the employer or the government for the consequences of accidents. The costs of workplace injuries and deaths were left mainly to individual workers and their families. Stonemason Eric Isaacson had a disabling accident in 1917.
He went to work for Butler Construction until he fell from a scaffolding and broke his back. His daughter, Lillian, must have been about 15 or so, and she went to Johnson High School. She had to leave Johnson and go to work because he couldn't work anymore with a broken back. And I know Butler didn't have any insurance for him, so there wasn't any insurance for bricklayers in those days, unfortunately.
To ease the impact of illness, accident, or death, many workers joined together in unions, fraternal organizations, and ethnic mutual benefit societies. Members pooled their money and helped one another when misfortune struck. Marvin's grandfather applied his experience in his trade and in his union when he left St. Paul to return to Chicago.
He knew what he wanted to do, and he did it. And he was an extremely strong man. He worked right into his 60s in Chicago, where he had formed the Black Bricklayers Association in Chicago.
Marvin's niece, Jennifer, became intrigued about her great-grandfather, Ernest, and dug into his story for an article she wrote.
This man was an enigma to me. And so the more I found out about him, the more I wanted to know about him. Here's a picture of my great-grandfather. And he's got a headdress on. He's half Cherokee, I believe, and half African-American. This is my ancestor, and I'm so proud of him. I mean, it's just, it gives me strength.
The contributions of the builders to creating such an iconic Minnesota landmark have continued to reverberate through generations of their families in very personal ways.
I have always felt this very special connection to my great-grandfather.
You know that somewhere in amongst all the woodworking that was done at the Capitol, he was there. He was responsible for some of it. So we have this connection with not only with him and the work that he did, but with the Capitol. It's a gift.
Marvin Anderson became an attorney and the Minnesota State Law Librarian.
We had an office in the state capitol. So I'm walking through this building every day. I'm wondering if I'm hearing the echoes of my grandfather or not. He worked on this building. My mother was very, very proud of it. You know, Papa did this, Papa did that, you know, you working with Papa. Papa helped build that building. I mean, of course, according to my mother and Aunt Mary, he was probably the only Mason on the whole building. No one else had anything to do with it except Papa.
The Capitol building has been at the center of public life for the people of the state since the cornerstone was laid. This is the place where Minnesotans come together to express their opinions and their remembrance.
The very intention for the building to be put up was to be a place, the house for the people, and we were celebrating our civic ability and our society and our civilized ability to come together to create a place for everyone to come together and meet.
Glenn Johnson supervised the lifting of the quadriga, the golden horse statue, when restoration work was necessary to preserve it.
I remember I was a little kid, I came up here from grade school and got to touch these things, and to get a chance to come up here and work on them, that was fabulous. I think we just kind of take it for granted, the craftsmanship that was put into these buildings, and I don't think we could afford to build this today, not like this. So the craftsmanship in here, It's unbelievable. And you can think of the hours and the years it took to put this thing all together. It's just unbelievable that it's still here, and it's this good a shape still after 100 years. Things wear out and they break down, and the weather in this country is harsh, and you got to take care of what you own, and this is the people's. It belongs to the people.
The Minnesota State House is admired throughout the state and across the nation. The beauty and significance of this Minnesota jewel is all the more profound when we rediscover and remember the men and women who built our capital.